Hello and welcome to episode 1 of season 2 of the /sthg/podcast, recorded in September 2nd, 2020 at 10 p.m. BST. We are currently waiting for an aunt to join. Please relax and enjoy the music.
I hope I'm being read correctly, and I hope you heard that right correctly, because in the past 5 minutes I've decided that this is season 2 now. Part of my decision is that apparently I died a couple times in my absence. I got range banned. Someone in my area did something kind of serious, I guess. And and also I did do a couple trips. So I've been kind of absent from the general. And apparently I killed myself. I don't know why people believe that. I don't know who perpetrated that. But here I am, alive and in season 2. So, and in this season 2, I decided, again, this is all has been all in the past 5 minutes. This is going to be high production value and more attentive by me, because I've kind of realized that. I mean, this really started as like kind of like a continuation of the VR chat meetups. But it didn't really work out that way. I hope I'm being read correctly. Okay, go a little quieter. It didn't really work out that way. I guess either people preferred a more organized thing, or maybe people just don't prefer the podcast idea at all. I guess I'll find out. But yeah, the idea is that this is video now, so I can see the bubbles. Hello? We're here already. I can't hear you if you have a mic. But I was just saying, like, this is meant to be high production value. Video. I guess I'll use like a little bit better art. I don't know. Take a little more time in this paint. But yeah, and we already got our first person here already. Can't hear her, but it's fine. But I guess the production value would include editing, like actual editing, actual topics. Yeah, that's pretty exciting.
Got desires to eat food that's healthier and savorier, but just don't know how?
That's my advertisement, because I don't have YouTube Premium or any ad block. Yeah, your mic isn't working still, so if you're talking right now, I can't hear you.
No, my mic's working. I haven't had anything to say because I just kind of popped in.
Oh, okay.
I couldn't tell if you were actually talking to me or someone else in the room or something. I mean, I'm actually the only person here.
Yeah, I'm talking to myself. That's the idea now, is that it's supposed to be high production value.
Do you have a topic planned for tonight?
Huh? What do you say?
So do you have a topic planned for tonight?
Yeah, I got a couple.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I got about too many to count. But they're all kind of like minor topics. A lot of them in the past 10 minutes. Do you want us to go down?
I mean, no.
Huh?
You could always end up in a situation where what seems like a small topic sparks more conversation than you thought it would.
Oh, yeah?
Sometimes small details can be a lot more nuanced than you think they are on the surface.
Yeah, a lot of I mean, that's how conversations work, right? Is that one thing leads to another.
Mm-hmm.
So what I guess I would consider a small topic would be, what is your first Sonic game? I don't think I asked you that.
For me, it was Sonic Adventure 1. Interesting story. Mm-hmm.
You said you had a story?
Interesting context. Yeah, there's interesting context to that, actually. Because, you see, at the time, one of my mom's friends had divorced her husband and moved in with us, and with her son Nathan, who they lived with us for a few years, and Nathan kind of became like a second brother. You know,
Yeah.
I have like 2 younger siblings, so it was just kind of the 4 of us all just sort of had a group sibling dynamic. But Nathan was really into Sonic, and the funny thing is that the first thing that caught my interest was actually not even like the game itself, but like a Sonic fan like YouTube series. You know those like usually they're really bad, but you know those like fanfic YouTube series for Sonic where will be like screenshots from Sonic X and they'll just like have scrolling text for like character dialogue and stuff.
I think I've
it was like one of those.
Oh, okay.
And the show in question that I got hooked on isn't even on YouTube anymore. I can't find it, at least. I'm pretty sure it was taken down at some point over the years. But, it wasn't very good. But, like, little 13-year-old me was, like, really into it. And that extended into him, like, properly introducing me into Sonic. Like, I kind of stumbled upon him watching this thing and was curious, and I got real engrossed in it. And he's like, you know, well, I got a Sonic game, you want to play Sonic? And it was Adventure 1 on, like, the computer. So that was my first experience playing Sonic. And then, of course, that also extended into me, like, the show I was watching was basically built on the Sonic X continuity, which extended into me going and watching Sonic X, and everything kind of just snowballed from there. Honestly, I'd still say that Adventure 1 is my personal favorite. I'm not going to try and argue that it's like the objectively best Sonic game or anything, but I think it's still my favorite, partly out of nostalgia and partly just out of certain personal preferences that a lot of other games don't incorporate. Like, one of the reasons I still kind of like it over Adventure 2 is that I like the hub worlds. The menu screen, like the level select screen in Adventure 2, to me, it takes me out of the experience, if that makes any sense. I like hub worlds because it makes things feel like more cohesive. I don't feel pulled out of the experience of the game / story by like a level select screen. No, I think some Sonic games level select screens don't pull me out of the experience as much. Like Shadows doesn't do it as much, and Sonic Forces don't do it as much. And I think it's because in those games the menus select, like the level select screen, feels like more aesthetically tied to the game as a whole, and so I think they don't pull me out of it as much. I also liked what Generations did, where it's kind of this halfway point between being a hub world and just being a level select screen. It was very kind of cute and clever, and I liked that quite a bit, actually. I like Generations a lot. It was a good game. Hate the fact that they shoved classic Sonic into Forces, though. That was a stupid decision, but I do still love Generations quite a lot.
Yeah, I do miss the hub worlds. I feel like they definitely give, like you said, continuity, and they kind of give the game a lot more material than it probably actually has, you know?
Yeah.
Because then you can just kind
I think
of create little stories that are very interesting, or at least interesting to me. Like in Adventure 1, there was a whole like girl and the pizza dude. The guy that worked at the pizza
there's
shop.
lots of like little stories going on with like the random NPCs throughout the city.
Also, there was the one with the mother who was gambling, and the son just had to wait outside every night. I mean, that was some heavy stuff right there.
That was sad. There's also the workers'
It's like
strike.
It's a lot of like nice little touches there. Like the fact that the NPCs have these little stories, like design wise, they're lazy as shit. But I think that was partly limitations of the of what they had to work with at the time, if I'm not mistaken.
That was impressive for 1998, though.
Yeah, like limitations of the tech at the time, I think, is a big part of why the NPCs are so like lazily done. But like, so I'm not going to shit on it too much. But I think it is kind of cute and clever how like they all have like these interesting little lives going on when you talk to them. And it's just a neat little touch that kind of makes the world feel more like a real place. Modern Sonic games don't really have any concern whatsoever for trying to create a feel of like an actual world that the story takes place in. A lot of times it kind of feels like nowadays the approach is just, well, we're just kind of writing excuses for levels, and we don't really care about the world that the story takes place in, like, at all. You know?
Yeah.
Just write some bad jokes to tie together the levels, and you're golden. That's one of the reasons why, despite the fact that I love Color's gameplay, like, I think Color's is very fun to play, Color's story kind of pisses me off. Because, like, the jokes aren't good. They're just not funny. And, like, the story is so committed to being a nothing plot where there are no stakes at all, that, like, there's a moment where Eggman, like, mind controls Tails, and you think momentarily that you're gonna get, like, a Sonic and Tails fight, which would be really cool. Like, having a versus fight with Sonic and Tails could be really fun and cool to do, but they don't do it. They immediately walk back on that within the same scene, and you don't get to... The mind control thing never becomes relevant. It never creates any conflict in the story. I mean, it's Eggman's end goal, I guess, but it never actually does anything in the story, really. Which is just such a fucking waste.
What did y'all think of Lost World?
Lost World to me is a very mixed bag on a story level. I never actually played the game, but I watched the game. I have that relationship with a number of Sonic games where I'm curious enough to see what they did with the story that I'll, like, watch the game, but not get around to playing it for one reason or another because I feel like I'm constantly busy with shit. But Lost World is a game where when I saw it when it came out, like at GameStop or whatever at the time, I saw it and I was like, I think I'm gonna skip this one. Like, I took one look at the cover, I was like, this looks kind of shit. I don't like the Zeddies, I don't like their designs, I didn't like how Mario fucking looking everything was, so it's like, I'm just gonna give this one a skip. Looking back at the story, at least, I don't know that I can speak to the gameplay, but the story is very much a mixed bag for me, because Lost World has moments where it actually is kind of cool and kind of interesting. It's weird.
You better be... AR, you better be careful. I mean, that is some big-ass hot take right there y'all got.
It has its moments, though. Like, the Zeddy are not super well-written villains, and they're actually better in Lost World than in anything else. Oh, 1 second.
Oh yeah, the Zeddy are a little, I feel like they're underutilized. Like, I feel like they're kind of portrayed as, by other people as, kind of useless. But I think you can definitely write some interesting stories of them.
AAR, I think, was, like, involved, or wrote a story, I think, that used the Zeddy. It was pretty good. So it can be done. The question is, if Sega saw a good story with the Zeddy, would they even allow it to happen? I mean, that's an interesting thought to have right there.
I don't know. I feel like
if not,
I feel like it's just Sega's very split, or whoever's in charge. I don't know if it's Sega directly, but there's a really big split between kind of having serious stories and having very kiddie stories. I think that was pretty well demonstrated with Forces, is because you had this really kind of cool, edgy villain, and I don't mean edgy in a bad way, while you had these kind of lame jokes, you know? So I feel like there's conflict. So I think what I'm trying to get at is that I don't think that they're totally unopen to a serious or more complex story. That's just my opinion.
I agree. But I don't know.
Okay, I'm back.
Given how much Forces failed, I'm not sure if they're going to allow. Oh, we were talking about the Zeddy, and if they could be redeemed.
Oh yeah, the thing I was saying is that Lost World, I think, is the best appearance of the Zeddy so far, which is unfortunate. That the only appearance where I think they were actually kind of okay is their first appearance. Like, in their first appearance, they were kind of alright. The problem with the later appearances of the Zeddy, in large part, is that A, they didn't choose to elaborate on the characters at all in any of their, subsequent appearances. So they're still very flat. And B, in the Lost World, they had, kind of a motivation for what they were doing. Like, Eggman tried to control them. They got pissed off, and then they decided to use his machine to fuck up the planet just to sort of get revenge. Like, it's sort of like, it's a decent enough motivation. They make enough sense, and they're actually kind of all right as villains in the first game that they appear in. But like in all the subsequent appearances, there's little to no justification for them being involved in the plot at all, which just makes them fucking annoying as piss. Like, seeing Zavik appear in a story with absolutely no justification for why he's there is just one of the most obnoxious fucking things. Especially because he isn't the kind of character who's, like, endeared us enough to him that we'd be excited to see him, you know? I think you can make Zavik Letty work. It's just you have to actually write a fucking story for them instead of just shoving them in.
Y'all need to break them from Eggman.
Yeah.
Have you written any stories
What?
about the Zeddy?
But yeah, I think Lost World has some good moments. Like, there's one scene with Eggman where he gets really, like, pissed off at some message from Zavik or whatever and punches a wall. And it's kind of a neat Eggman moment. It shows Eggman being momentarily, like, a little bit scary, and I kind of like it. Not, like, scary in, like, an edgy way, but just, it's neat, you know? Like, those kinds of small moments are neat, and Lost World has a couple of moments that are just kind of cool moments. The tone feels a little confused, I guess. Granted, I'm not the kind of person who's against putting, like, I don't think that a story needs to be either edgy and dark or light and fluffy. You can balance, and you can have, like, a darker story that still is able to tell jokes and have some lighter moments. As a random example, like, Sonic Adventure 2 has moments in it that are more comedic, despite generally being a bit more of a, like, serious, darker story. Lost World, I think, just kind of struggles to balance its tone sometimes. There are moments that should be more impactful than they are. You know, like when the planet is dying, Amy has, like, this message that Sonic receives, where, like, she's dying in the message, and then it cuts out, and, like, it's like this sort of, like, you know, this scene is weird for a couple reasons. One, the fact that it's Amy doing a deathbed confession, as if Sonic doesn't already know that she loves him. Not like a revelation for her to say that. Not news. So it's kind of weird to treat this as if it's some kind of heartfelt revelation. But the second thing is just that, like, you just saw one of your friend's possible girlfriend, like, maybe kind of, sort of, but not quite girlfriend, maybe die on the screen, but it doesn't have the kind of weight on Sonic's character or the rest of the story that you would expect it to. It just kind of happens, and then the story just sort of moves on. In fact, funny enough, I think it was a fan fiction that made me think of just how weird this actually is in hindsight, where the person in the fanfiction had Sonic being, like, all over protective of Amy, and at first I assumed that's just how they chose to write him. But then they actually have a moment where they justify it with, like, Sonic is being overprotective because after that message he got from her in Lost World, he's been generally kind of paranoid about losing her. I'm like, this reminds me, Lost World should have actually had some emotional consequences for that scene, but it didn't. Of course, Forces is the king of this problem, what with the whole Sonic's been tortured for months, but we see him and he's perfectly fucking fine with no evidence that there's been any real impact on his character from this.
Honey, I was wondering, my biggest problem is that why are they still tied to Eggman? I mean, and one thing I like about the Zeddy is if we finally the
fact that the Zeddy are tied to Eggman is absolute horseshit, because they hate his guts. There's no reason why they should be constantly working with him, and a lot of times they don't even fucking give an explanation. At least in Forces, there was the stupid-ass reveal that Zavik wasn't even Zavik, that it was actually, like, an illusion from Infinite, but God, is that so stupid? I actually really hate that whole, like, oh, well, it's not actually any of these villains here. They're just projections from Infinite. I hate that, because it's like, we didn't actually want to take the time to try and write a creative story reason as to why all of these characters would be working with Eggman, because that would be too hard. So we just do some stupid ass poll where it's like they're all actually illusions. Blah. I'm like, at that point, why didn't you just have us fighting like weird infinite theme monsters? Like in there's this city level where there's these weird noodle monsters with Infinite's face mask, and those are kind of cool. What if instead of shoving in Shadow clones and Chaos clones and Zavik clones, what if instead you just created like different like interesting monsters that like all were kind of with that aesthetic, that were all like obviously just extensions of Infinite, where they all like had his like mask with like all sorts of like weird creative bodies and like abilities and stuff, you know? They could even have like weird creepy body parts, like you know, mouths in weird places or teeth or whatever sticking out of them. Like, just go, like, just do something creepy with it, like you did with those noodle things in that one level. Like, those weird noodle infinite things are cool and creepy, and I'd rather see more of that kind of stuff than knockoffs of characters that you're too lazy to actually write.
Yeah.
At least they would have been kind of like cool-looking boss fights and wouldn't have just been rehashes.
Mm-hmm. By the way, it's nice to see you, Fluffy. Thank you for coming with us. Yeah, it's definitely a lot of it's a lot of disappointment upon disappointment. I think the edgy characters definitely have a lot of potential. It's just that kind of they aren't really fully committed to, you know?
Yeah, but like the biggest problem is that every time they set up something kind of edgy, they never like actually commit to it anymore. They're like so scared of being seen as like they're so scared and insistent that they need to keep everything light and fluffy and ironic that like any attempt at actually sincere stakes is always undercut. You know, they'll like try to do something dark, but then immediately undercut it. Forces
ironically,
like that.
Ironically, I would say the Zombat arc is kind of funny, just because I think if y'all were a fan of serious stories and y'all didn't like it, you're kind of like, and I could say for some people that the Zombat arc might have even dug that ditch lower because it was a bad serious story, and it basically just like I'm sorry, but like that and the forces
and arcs being poor had nothing to do with it being dark or serious. That really wasn't the problem at all. The Zombat's arcs problems had a lot to do with, for one, there's a lot of just like basic kind of mechanical problems with it. The Inflim does not maintain consistency, even just between two issues that are right next to each other sometimes, which is annoying as piss. There's like, he doesn't properly define the mechanics for how the virus work and is very loose with the rules, which is not a good thing to do in a story that's meant to be serious and dramatic. We should understand how the rules work so we have a really proper sense of the stakes. There's also just like, you know, the fact that like a lot of scenes in which characters get infected that should be dramatic and intense are undercut by the fact that a lot of times characters only get infected because they do stuff that's just fucking stupid. Like there were a number of scenes where I could think of very small changes that would have made that scene way more impactful just by like making a couple small changes so that the character gets infected in a way that doesn't feel contrived. You know? I think the ultimate example of this being Shadow being all like, I am the ultimate life form, nothing can hurt me. And then just touching the Zombots, like...
I'm sorry, but it seems like the only message they got with that story was, or anyone involved got with that story was, it's too long and too dark. Which I can't see the problem because it's, I can see them as problems. That's basically all anyone could from that story. But it's problems that it's too long. So y'all saying that it wasn't too long, it was just a badly executed dark story.
Yeah, it was just poorly executed story. I think even if I went in and even if I were to make the kind of fixes that I think that would have improved it, I still don't think it would have been like my favorite Sonic plot or anything like that. But it would have at least accomplished its goals better if it like, didn't have characters, say, get infected by being really stupid, or be inconsistent or flippant about the mechanics of how the virus works, or pacing issues. Like, not pacing as in the story is just generally too long, but, like, Flynn is very not judicious with how he uses his pages. There were times where he would, like, waste pages on information that's completely unimportant. I think the most blatant example is there's an issue early on where Sonic essentially recaps to Tangle what happened in the previous issue, even though we already got a recap at the beginning of this issue. So this comic issue is essentially published with effectively 2 recaps in it, just because I guess Flynn couldn't think of a better way to pad out that issue. It's so baffling. It's such a baffling waste of pages, and it annoyed the piss out of me. But then, like, by contrast, there are times where he just skips over stuff that actually would have been kind of good to see. Either good to see just because it would have been cool to see, or in some cases, it actually would have been important to establish. Like, sometimes also I think he just changes his mind about stuff between issues and just expects his audience not to notice. Like, in the first time we see some people, like, we see Rough and Tumble infected with the Zombot virus, whenever you hit them, they, like, behave kind of like a liquid, like they're made of taffy. And I thought that was kind of neat and could make for some creative fights, but the Zombots never have this property at any point after that. Like, Flynn just changed his mind about how the Zombots work, or didn't communicate to the artists how they were supposed to work, and just decided to change it to them just being indestructible, and, like, you just hit them and stuff bounces off or whatever, I guess. And, like, okay, just fucking change the mechanics for how these things work in between issues for no reason other than just, I guess you liked it this way better. Like, come fuck on. Then there's other, like, little things. Like, there's an issue where before Tails goes to his lab to try and, like, use his computer to work on the cure, like, in the previous issue at the very end, Silver is like, you know, I'll go with you, Tails, to go get the cure. And then at the start of the next issue, Silver is off doing something totally unrelated that isn't even really explained. Like, he's in a totally different zone, like, I guess, looking for survivors. We have no explanation as to why he changed his mind about going with Tails, and why he's in this other area instead, or even what he's doing besides just broadly trying to evacuate people. And then Silver is just missing for, like, multiple issues, and when he shows up again, it's like, oh, you're back from collecting survivors in that one area. And I'm just thinking, like, how long has it been since we saw Silver? How did he, like, it's been, like, it has to have been, like a couple, like, it feels like it's been way too long for him to have spent that entire time still doing that one thing, because a bunch of stuff's happened since then. I'm like, so Silver just got shelved so that he could do a vague, pointless task for a suspiciously long period of time, and it's not important to anything. Like, it's confusing, but it's not important to anything. Flynn just didn't want to write Silver, like, didn't want to write around him, I guess, and so just was very lazy in writing Silver out. If you didn't want to write around Silver, why didn't you just fucking infect him, or at the very least, like, have him get really injured and not be able to fight for a while? Why is this what you chose to do? It is the weirdest way to shelve a character. And
I have a better question. I have a better answer. I have a better answer. Ultimately, did Silver even need to be in the store? I mean, theoretically, the future could have been saved. It never had to happen. Something, and for all we know, they could have actually made it.
That is true. If he didn't want. Okay, there's one reason why I think there's a justification for putting Silver here, and that is that I think the logic is that if Silver isn't there, then the assumption, then, like, the audience automatically knows, well, Silver's not here, so obviously this doesn't lead to the apocalypse. Actually, no, that doesn't even work in this scenario, because it's possible that if Eggman won, Silver would never even exist, period. That he just would have never been born. Because Eggman would just wipe out all life on the planet. So, actually, you know what? Never mind. You could totally have just not had Silver in the story, and if anyone questioned it, you could have a character mention it and have somebody have this horrified realization that, like, what if Eggman wins and Silver doesn't exist anymore? And that could have been like an interesting moment of like kind of dread sinking in their gut as they wonder if Silver's lack of presence is a sign that they're going to lose or something. Like, that could be interesting. That could have been an interesting dramatic moment. Or you could have just not had him in the story, just not brought it up at all, and I don't think the audience would have likely questioned it that much. So.
Yeah, the IDW comment does have some flaws in it. I don't think anyone's in disagreement, but how do you feel like the writing in actual mainline games has been any better?
I think I have different problems entirely with the mainline games and their writing. How do I put this? I think that one thing the games have going to their advantage is that they are games, so even if the writing is bad, I'm still capable of enjoying them on that level. Like, I can still have fun playing it, even the writing's bad. I think the Zombot arc was more frustrating for me to read, because I think there's, like, a lot of these kinds of problems just more concentrated, because they're not broken up by gameplay to distract me or anything. You know? I think that I really don't like Pontaff's writing just because, like, Pontaff's writing often feels very lazy to me. Lost World's like one of the few exceptions where it actually kind of feels like he was trying. I mean, it has its problems, but I feel like there was some sincere effort there, so I'll give it that. But a lot of times it feels like lazy. Forces has this weird problem where, like, it wants to be a dark, serious story, but then, like, every time there's like a kind of serious moment, they immediately undercut the tension before it has a chance to sink in. So it's this weird tone whiplash the entire way through, where it's where like it's telling you to feel this way, but then simultaneously expressing a different emotion altogether.
Yeah, you get kind of a different. When they say that Sonic has been tortured for months, you kind of get a different picture in your head than what you get when you actually see him. So. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of conflicting tones.
Forces is like is like interacting with someone who tells you I'm sad while they're smiling. You know? It's this weird like disconnect. You say one thing, but your actions say something else, and that's a lot of Forces tone is. I wanted to like Forces. I went into it wanting to like it because I really wanted to have another game that actually like tried to have some stakes and maybe some dramatic moments. Hell, prior to the game's release, I had basically written like a whole story in my head to justify why like Shadow and Zavik and Chaos and stuff were all there, right? The story I wrote in my head was infinitely more interesting than what we got and had a lot more like complex moving parts. Particularly, I thought the idea of having all of these villains all of these characters kind of teamed up under, like, dubious circumstances, characters manipulating each other or being, controlled, and stuff like that, like, you know, having some kind of, like, complex internal politics among the villains, could have been, like, really cool. That's not what they did, though, because that would have taken actual time and effort to write, I guess.
Yeah. Maybe I'm an idiot, but I feel like
Infinite is such a massive disappointment too, because he's legitimately a cool villain up until you get the Shadow DLC, which is fun to play, but then you get essentially a backstory for Infinite that is the most just stupid fucking shit. Everything else about this character was great. His design, his voice acting, his music was all fantastic. He was a cool villain, and I liked him. And then they just had to fucking trip at the finish line with him and give him like a stupid ass backstory. Which, by the way, is contradicted by the main game itself, because in the main game, there's like when you're sort of like the one of the second last level or whatever it is, there's this line of dialogue among the characters about how this is where Infinite was born, and Amy comments on how it would be such a sad, like, lowly, dark, cold place to be born or whatever. And it's like, but then the Shadow DLC doesn't imply that at all. It doesn't imply that Infinite was created by Eggman. It just implies that he was like a mercenary dude who got pissed off that he lost a fight one time. And I'm just like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
What are you trying to do?
I feel like it's kind of fun to try to justify the whole week thing, you know? Like, I feel
I
like,
think. Oh, sorry, I'll let you finish.
I think it's kind of interesting because you could think of it as, I mean, it doesn't really make a lot of sense in the context with the backstory comic that I think Ian Flynn did before Forces came out, but I think it's interesting if, like, his whole I'm not weak thing is more tied to, like, he's supposed to be strong because he's, like, a protector of someone. Like, if you remember from The Dark Knight Rises, Bane, he's meant to be, like, the protector of, what's her name? Like, the girl that Bruce Wayne has sex with.
Talia? Is it Talia? Is that who it is?
Talia.
Well, here's the thing. The problem with that is that the problem I have with that is that when you tell a story, the important things that we need to know to understand the characters' motivations and the plot should be explained in the story proper. You shouldn't have to, like, go somewhere else for that info. Because, like, even if they had supplementary material that gave Infinite a better justification for why he reacted that way to losing that fight, it wouldn't really matter because the game itself doesn't have this information. And the funny thing is, without the Shadow DLC, Infinite doesn't really have a ton of backstory or motivation, and it actually works just fine. Like, we loosely imply that he might have been created by Eggman, but leave it a bit ambiguous, and that actually works alright. But the justification that they do give, if we take it at face value and assume nothing else is a factor, it's fucking stupid. So the only way to make it not stupid is to add more supplementary material to fix your fuck up. Like...
Yeah. I mean, I think, kind of going along with what you said, some of the most interesting characters concerning video games, or what people consider very interesting characters, like G-Man and the Wingdings guy from Undertale, they're kind of they're intentionally written to be kind of
characters, yeah.
just kind of mystery for mystery's sake. Like, in G-Man in particular, it's kind of obvious that he was not really meant to be this supernatural being at the beginning. I think he was meant to be like Combine in the first game, but I think they realized that would be kind of boring and anticlimactic, so they kind of changed him around to be this sort of fourth dimensional being.
Yeah. But I would have been totally fine with Infinite being a villain who is kind of mysterious and whose motivations aren't fully understood by the player. Honestly, before playing the Shadow DLC, I kind of dig this idea of Infinite as just being like this kind of awful sadist who just does what he does because he just gets sincere pleasure from hurting people. Like, that's very shallow as a motivation, but it's also kind of scary as shit that the only motivation this character has is just that he likes hurting people, because it means that you can't reason with him. There's no room for growth or reformation. He's just kind of a monster, but I'd be okay with that. Would have made him a fun, creepy villain, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think what am I saying? The idea of having the kind of the Phantom Ruby like drilled into his chest is kind of gives that idea off, you know? Because it's not like attached by some robotic thing, just literally inside his chest. So yeah.
Infinite could have been like a fun, creepy villain if they just didn't bother with the backstory altogether and just let him be this creepy sadist who just likes hurting people and has a lot of power. Like, that could have been just fine on its own.
I like to think that, funny enough, that random thought that the reason you don't see the Infinite clones or whatever fighting Sonic is because Eggman was telling Infinite that he doesn't want him to make the clones. He deliberately demanded that he make all of his illusions Sonic's former enemies, which just I'm sorry. I just think that Infinite also probably suffers from being tied to Eggman. I'm pretty sure Eggman probably told Infinite, "Listen, y'all, I
Well,
don't
I
want y'all."
feel like if they had done a better job with him this time, we could have maybe seen him pop up again in another story in the future and had him be independent from Eggman. Um, and then that could have been cool, but like I feel like the odds of them using him again after they fucking flubbed up his pseudo backstory and forces are kind of low. Um, Can I just say that classic Sonic being in Forces, by the way, is probably one of the things that was like, aside from the game's general distrust of like allowing for emotional sincerity, the other big problem with the game, like the two biggest problems are A, that it won't commit to its tone. When it's supposed to be serious, it won't commit to it. But number two, classic Sonic is legit just a huge fucking problem for this game, like on a narrative level. Like, I don't care if you like his levels mechanically, that's not really my complaint. My complaint is that on a narrative level, he sucks ass because he doesn't talk. He doesn't have like he has very little personality to him. He doesn't speak. So like all the scenes with him are just Tails learning about the plot and doing exposition, and Classic Sonic is just there. Every scene with Classic Sonic feels like a goddamn waste of space that could have been spent on like Sonic and like the OC character and developing their stories more. Like those stories feel half-baked in part because they have to share screen time with Classic, who really doesn't have a story at all. You know? It's such a waste. It's such a waste. Oh.
I think it's very unlikely, but I hope they bring Infinite back for more stories, because I really think there's a lot of potential there. Like,
I do think there's potential, and I think he could be cool and fun, but I just don't know if we're going to see him again, which is a little sad, because we still get stuck with Zavik every single Bloodborne game, and no one even liked him to begin with.
I got that. I mean, I don't think he's coming back because they pretty much scrubbed him from every material he was supposed to be in. Like, you can find, the Sonic Speed Forces, or Sonic Forces Speed Battle app. Like, the whole thing is set up so it's like Infinite's effect, but he isn't in the game. Or the TSR, his effect is in the game files, but it's...
That's so baffling to me too. Is that like that Infinite had just this one thing that people didn't like. People seem to like Infinite otherwise. It's just the one thing that people meme on because it's dumb, right? But they liked pretty much everything else about him. But as a result, we fucked up this one thing with this character. Okay, we're never going to use him again and erase him for everything. But here's Zavik, a character that no one really liked all that much, even in the first game he was in. And we're going to shove him into everything just because reasons. I don't know.
Yeah.
He's so dumb that Zavik keeps getting shoved into stuff. I don't even hate Zavik necessarily. I think he can be handled well if you actually write a story for him. But most of the time, there is no actual story for Zavik. He's just fucking there, and it's so annoying. Also, just, I don't care for the Zeddy's designs. And they've grown on me a little over time, but still, he feels so just hardcore, not like dollar store Bowser. You know?
Mm-hmm.
Which is really annoying.
Yeah, it really does look like a Mario villain. He doesn't really look too Sonic-like, in my opinion.
Yeah, the Zeddy they look like Mario characters, not like Sonic characters, and it's kind of annoying and distracting. They never really look like they fit with the rest of the character designs.
Yeah.
Hell, I don't like Chip, and I still thought Chip was kind of a weird design, but Chip at least looks a lot more like a Sonic character than the Zeddy
Don't
did.
you
Like, yeah,
ever talk shit about Chip in my fucking presence. Chip's the fucking best.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Chip is pretty good. I like Chip. He was
Hey, you'll have to take me with a grain of salt, because I have kind of limited patience for characters that are almost exclusively comic relief characters. I kind of would prefer to just have normal characters that are capable of being funny sometimes, rather than have one character whose sole job is to just do jokes and nothing else. They tend to get on my nerves because they often come across as just shallow characters with very little going to them. And the fact that the game expected me to feel sad when he sacrifices himself at the end or reunites with Gaia or whatever, just, I didn't feel sad. I didn't care because I never felt like this character had a lot of going for him besides just funny food jokes. Not that felt to me like that was kind of all there was to him. Like Chip if you want. I mean, I'm not.
Have you seen the Sonic Boom show? Have you seen like the show for like Sonic Boom?
I liked Boom actually. I liked it quite a bit. I know that. Okay, I'm sorry. I know that sounds silly because I was just saying that I don't care for Chip because I felt like there was nothing else going for him. And Boom is strictly a comedy show. But I think that's partly the difference too, is that Boom is explicitly a comedy show where all of the characters get to be funny. There's no one character who has to meet the joke quota on their own. They all get to be funny in Boom, and Boom is also a comedy show that doesn't try to make you take anything particularly seriously. So it's not like the joke has any dramatic tension, you know?
I would say Knuckles. They shit on Knuckles a lot. That upsets me.
I was really upset about Knuckles at first, but Boom Knuckles did grow on me as a character, because I did begin to find him very endearing. But part of the way I'm able to enjoy him is just by treating him as a different character, you know?
Yeah.
And he does have a couple of jokes that legit are some of my favorite in the show.
He's funny, but like that's all he is.
But yeah, he is kind of not allowed to do anything but be dumb and funny. I think I do like Boom Knuckles a little more than Chip, though, partly because I think there's maybe a little more variety to his humor, and I just find him a bit more endearing overall. I can't exactly put why. I think maybe part of it is that Boom Knuckles isn't trying to be cute, so when he is cute, it's just kind of accidental, whereas Chip is like, hey, look at this character, we explicitly designed him to be cute. Isn't he cute? And
he is, though. He's the cutest.
I don't know. I'm very picky about what I consider cute. And Chip is like, so when a character is like clearly meant to be cute, it doesn't always hit with me, and sometimes it gets on my nerves. But that's partly a me thing. So like, again, if you think Chip is cute, go right ahead. I'm not gonna. I
think all Sonic characters are cute. I'm not picky at all. I'm just like, yep, thank you. Check, please.
Fair enough. I think the thing I like about Boom Knuckles too is that like there's kind of this, like the first episode tries to present him as sort of arrogant, but honestly, as the show progresses, he kind of just comes across as a cinnamon roll character, which I think is part of why I like him. Is that, like, he just sort of proves to be kind of unambiguously a sweet person, and I think that makes him sort of endearing, despite the fact that he's dumb as a box of rocks. But yeah, Boom was funnier than I expected it to be. I feel like that show was better than it had any right to be.
Yeah, I don't know why, but it's so funny.
Like, well, I think Boom is kind of a perfect example of how, like, even if you're given very little to work with or strict, restrictions, you can still make something good if you're just creative and you put the effort in.
Yeah.
Like, Boom had a lot of restrictions on what it could and couldn't do, what characters it could use, etc. But, like, it still managed to be a surprisingly good show, despite all the things it had working against it, because the people working on it were funny and clever, and they found ways to work within their means, Mm-hmm. They're like, if we can only make a comedy show, then we might as well try to make the best comedy show we can, instead of trying and failing to be an action show,
Yeah.
Like, if we're mostly restricted to doing funny stuff, then just commit to that and be a funny show. And just try their best to make good jokes. Not all the jokes land, but enough of them do that it's a pretty good show.
Do you think if Pontaf just tried to be funny, they'd be good?
I would say no, because I feel like he was doing that in Colors, and he wasn't funny there, and most of the time when he's trying to be funny, his jokes don't land. Like, I can't think of many, if any, Pontaf jokes that actually made me laugh.
Do you think he would be funny if he didn't write for children?
I don't know, because here's the thing. That's a weird echo. The thing is, I don't think he would be funnier writing for adults, and the reason I say this is because if you can't tell a good joke under the restrictions of writing for kids, you're probably not going to tell great jokes writing for adults either, because, like, it's sort of a matter of fundamentals. If you don't have, like, good fundamentals, you know, like, for example, like, you know, if you're drawing, like, you know, cartoon characters, and you're like, you know, if you have solid fundamentals, you could draw probably just about any character or any style pretty well if your fundamentals are solid. Like, even if maybe his jokes were slightly funnier as adult jokes, I feel like they'd only be funnier just because of, like, the shock value of being able to be the shock value that adults are allowed to use. Like, I think he'd be the kind of person who would just say stuff that was generally raunchy, and it might get a laugh because it's raunchy and inappropriate, but not because it's, like, a well-structured, funny joke.
I see what
you know.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely.
I think y'all are forgetting, because I think it's important to know they all start on Mad World. And I play Mad World. And Mad World and Sonic Colors do two things right. And I think I know where the strength is and how they got hired. In Mad World, y'all have two commentators who make funny commentary all throughout the game. And it's actually pretty good. John Amacho does an excellent job. And the same thing that people love about calls with the 8-man announcements. 8-man announcements probably put in to reference the work they did on Mad World, which was funny. And I think what Pontap's biggest strength is making, like, he's basically a stand-up comedian. That's all he is. And I think that it's basically, you gave a stand-up comedian that I think if he just has to write jokes based upon, he's probably good at writing something based upon, like, witty commentary, but that's about all he can do. Sorry,
like, he can't write jokes when it comes to, like, you know, like, he has a hard time writing jokes in context of a story, like, between characters bantering or whatever. But he can do all right when he's doing, like, one character who's just kind of, you know, giving funny commentary or whatever on the sidelines. Like, when it's the same.
That's basically how I got hired.
Your response.
Yeah, basically. I was just pointing out, because the 8-man announcements are still never, even now, people still don't hate the 8-man announcements. And I think it's just mostly because that was the one area where Pontap's strength is, and it's basically it. They can do a good commentary, but that's about it. They're like a good Let's Player. It's like hiring a Let's Player to write your story.
I will say, I think a lot of, like, the sort of on-the-spot ad-libbed jokes that the voice actors come up with in the Twitter takedown are funnier than most of what Pontap has written. On the side, I kind of, like, those Twitter takedowns, I appreciate them because they show, like, how comfortable some of the voice actors are with their characters. Like, Mike Pollock basically just nails Eggman. He can just get into character on the spot, and it's not a struggle for him at this point because he's been doing it for so long. Roger Craig Smith does a pretty good job with Sonic in those Twitter takedowns too. Shadow's VA feels woefully lost. Like, I feel like they're trying. They're trying to be funny and get into character. But I feel like Shadow's VA is just so lost for, like, direction or motivation with their character. But to be fair, that's not entirely their fault. Every story that they've done with Shadow, like every game they've been on, every time they've had to do voice acting for Shadow, so there's been a story where, like, Shadow has almost nothing to do. Like, almost no motivation.
Yeah, I think in that case, the best course of action would be to just make him like a J.C. Denton kind of voice. Do you know who that is? No? Or yes?
I don't think so.
Oh yeah, it's a guy from Deus Ex. You can search up his voice clips on YouTube. They're pretty funny, but he's pretty much because he's like an RPG character, right? So he's like, or I don't know if that was the intention, but he's basically like completely devoid of emotion. So he'll just like, he'll just say like, he'll kill someone and just say, you have to kind of see it to understand what I'm saying, but
I do think deadpan humor would work well with Shadow's character, though I don't think he needs to be deadpan all the time. I think that extreme is maybe a little bit much. I still kind of like Shadow to still be like a little cocky or to get angry sometimes, or
yeah,
have kind of a range of emotion. But I do think deadpan jokes would work well with him. I also think that like the joke of like the character who like is just a grump type jokes, where like the joke is that like some absurd scenario or silly scenario is going on, and this guy is the one person who's like playing it straight, whereas no one else is taking it seriously type jokes.
I mean, when I said that's not really what I meant. Is that because the JC guy, he can be. What's funny about him is that he's very emotional while not being emotional. So I'm kind of not really describing it too well, but like, I think I'll send
subtle inflections.
I'm sorry?
His emotional expressions are subtle rather than like exaggerated.
Yeah, I guess. I'll just send a clip. I think that's easier. But yeah, I mean, you're probably right.
In any case, let me say them.
Oh fuck.
But yeah.
Could y'all make the new Shadow work in a story? I know lots of people say that he's now like kind of an egotistical grump, but I'm not sure if y'all can make that work in a story. Can y'all make that work in a story?
I can absolutely make a character who's like an arrogant grump still like work her stories. Whether you're trying to be dramatic or funny, like it's not like it's a rare archetype. As an example of a funny character in this archetype, Squidward in SpongeBob is like an absolute like pinnacle example of like the arrogant grump. I mean, I didn't keep up with SpongeBob my whole life or anything, like, so I can only really speak to like earlier SpongeBob, but like most of the jokes with Squidward revolve around the fact that he thinks that he's kind of full of himself and just generally kind of a grump ass. Like, if you're just going to go with like the kinds of jokes you can tell with characters like that, like even on a serious level, like in dramatic stories, you can have like the arrogant, grumpy characters still.
It's on its way back to the people, and you can't do a damn thing about it.
They can still like have like emotional complexity and stuff.
You are not afraid
and be
to
interesting
kill.
and do
I am
stuff.
pleased.
They can even
The
still
last
do
thing I would
heroic
expect
things.
from
So
the
it's
brother
like a
of
name for the trope. Like
Max might
the
have copper
knight
wiring to
sour
reroute your
armor,
fear of pain.
who's like
but
someone
I've
who
got nerves
does
of steel.
heroic things
What
because
you
they
want?
do at the core have a good heart and a strong moral compass. But they also just kind of don't like being around other people or have very little patience for people and are generally irritable. So like they'll save the day, but they're not really gonna be the most friendly person in the world throughout the process. And I think that's fine. I don't see why it's so confusing, the idea of writing a character like that.
I guess the only reason is people on sthg and Shadow. I think Shadow fans, I mean, of all the fans, they are very, very, very particular about how their character is, and they are very, very. I think you're just very obsessed with their character, and I'm not saying that. I
think the thing with Shadow fans, the two things that I think he's going on here. One, I think there's some Shadow fans that project whatever personality they want or relate to most onto Shadow, because Shadow's kind of like not been given a ton of characterization in a while, so they sort of just project whatever they want onto him, and they're very attached to the character that they've built up in their head. To those fans, I say it is best probably to just commit to a personality for Shadow and stick with it, and if it contradicts with the personality someone else gave him, I'm sorry that your headcanon got sunk. It happens, you know. It happens all the time. But the second thing is I think there's a lot of Shadow fans who, while they act very particular, I think what they really just want is a story that presents Shadow as having, like, emotional complexity. Because, like, the whole draw of his character, I think, in SA1 is the fact that, like, Shadow has kind of a level of emotional complexity the other characters don't have. Bear in mind, it's basically still that of an angsty teenager who is mad at the world. In fairness, because something traumatic happened to him. Shadow in SA1 is a child who went through something traumatic and lashes out at the world for it. It's just that this child happens to have the ability to kill everyone on the planet. But he really is basically just a hurt, sad, angry child. And I think that's fine as characterization goes. It's just that got resolved and then they didn't know what to do with him moving on from there. I feel like the logical progression is I feel like the logical place to take Shadow's character is to present him as someone who, given what we've seen of him so far and the fact that Sega still kind of wants to keep him as kind of this brooding loner, is to present him as somebody who is, like, you know, still a hero in the sense that they have a good moral compass and they don't want to see innocent people get hurt, but who generally pushes others away out of a fear of getting attached and then losing people again. If you get attached to someone, if you let them in emotionally, that person can leave you or die, and he doesn't want to go through that again. So whatever friends he does have are always kept kind of at arm's length as a result. And you could do some interesting storytelling with that. Now, because you are not really allowed to change the status quo, you couldn't really do a lot in the way of, like, ongoing character development in this avenue. This would just be a character flaw that would probably just be a consistent one that doesn't change. And that's just an unfortunate nature of the kind of comic that it is, but it still would be interesting to actually explore that aspect of the character, and it would show that there is some emotional complexity to Shadow and that he's not just an asshole for no reason. He isn't just a brooding loner just because. There are reasons for why he behaves the way that he does, and it makes him feel like more of a fleshed out character. I think that Shadow fans would probably be happy just seeing Shadow written in stories where it feels like he has, like, more of an actual character to him and is interesting, you know?
You ever read that story that gets posted around, the Shadow Jewel one? You ever read that one? I mean, it's not a real story. It's like a story concept.
You're talking about 3 Hours. It's one of Slashy's plots. I actually... Slashy?
Did he actually write that one, or did he commission it?
I don't think there's an actual script out for it yet. I think it's just a concept right now.
Did he write the concept, or was that?
Yeah, the concept was entirely him. I was about to say, like, Flashy normally doesn't do, like, serious plots. So when he came to me with, like, the premise for 3 Hours, I was kind of blown away that he created something that was that kind of dark and interesting, just, like, on his own. It's so weird to see something like that come out of him, but it's actually kind of an interesting, fun little character study on Shadow, and I kind of love it, honestly.
What, when people post about Crash the Bandicoot, or what's going on?
No, I'm talking about 3 Hours. Basically, the premise of 3 Hours is that Jewel gets cursed with this magic artifact where, like, once it essentially curses someone, if someone else kills her within the next 3 hours, they'll be able to resurrect some other dead loved one, right? So a bunch of, like, bad guys and, like, you know, miscellaneous people start crawling out of the woodwork to try and kill Jewel. Shadow, who happens to be in the area at the time, takes it upon himself to protect her, because ultimately she's just an innocent person who got wrapped up in this by accident. And the interesting sort of character study at play is the tantalizing opportunity of, like, if he kills her, he could get Maria back. Ultimately, he doesn't, because, you know, he ultimately commits to his morals and not hurting an innocent person for his own gain. But I think, like, exploring, like, exploring how he comes to that moral decision and and even just the fact that he kind of instinctively takes on the role of protecting her without thinking initially. Like, I just think there's a lot of room for interesting introspection on his character. It gives us some cool insight into Shadow's moral compass, why he thinks and feels why he thinks and behaves the way that he does. I think it's a cool story. It's kind of a surprisingly dark premise for Slashy. And because it has like this 3-hour, time limit, it's also kind of just got like a lot of action just all crammed up into a very short time frame. So it's a lot of like bam, 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 where it's just this high octane sequence of action sequence and like tense moments.
One thing that Shadow fans I noticed never comment on, which is interesting, because I think this was meant to be a new Shadow trait, is that he spends the story kind of insulting Tangle. Like, the entire story, he spends just calling her a piece of shit or something, which is something that I find really weird. That
yeah, well, that was because Tangle is like is the reason that Jewel ends up in the situation. Tangle does something like stupid and reckless, and it accidentally results in her friend being stuck in the situation. And Shadow is just generally unsympathetic to Tangle. And I think it's just sort of an example of what I was talking about before, about Shadow just being generally like, he's not very patient with people. So like his response to Tangle is like, oh, boo-hoo, your friend's in danger, whose fault is that? Because he's not that considerate of other people's feelings. He's not concerned with considering other people's feelings because he's not someone who ever really wants to get close to anyone in the first place. So dancing around people's feelings is never a priority of his. And he's just generally, like, kind of got very little patience, for others.
Y'all should make a script of that. I mean, if you ever want to, y'all should make like a script
I actually was hoping, I was actually planning to ask if he'd let me do the script for that one, because that one sounds like a fun one to rate for. And there's some stuff that I want to do with it that I think Slashy wouldn't think to do. So, and usually when I'm doing a script, he gives me a lot of, like, wiggle room to play with stuff, so. In the Stone Warriors premise that he gave me to write, he basically, like, gave me this premise of, like, okay, so there's this old bad guy from, like, from, like, 200 years ago, who wants to, like, revert time back to 200 years ago, but in the process it basically creates this little pocket where, like, we're essentially in Chunnan 200 years in the past, but that is like a little pocket stuck inside, like, Silver's future. So like outside the bubble, it's 200 years in the future because time is trying to correct itself. And it's like this is a very loose premise with like a couple of specifics that he wanted. Like, it was specifically set in Chunnan, and he wanted to use like a parallel, like a sort of a reference to like the terracotta soldiers, and like we get to fight like essentially like this big dragon wall thing. It's like a Great Wall of China type thing. It turns into a big dragon. There were, like, little specifics like that, but, like, a lot of stuff was just sort of left up to me, so I ended up basically creating the villain almost entirely. Like, he didn't really have a clear idea of what he wanted for the villain. Actually, the only vague idea he had initially for his design was, like, just do something that's kind of like the bad guy from Big Trouble in Little China. And I'm like, that dude is a racist caricature, right? It's like, I didn't know. Like, just let me handle this. So I made the design pretty much entirely on my own, and I kind of just fleshed out the character. My husband actually helped me with like the scripting for that character, because on the first pass, my husband came over and like read that character's dialogue, and he was like, for like a former Chinese emperor, the dude's dialogue sounds like some like long-winded blowhard European. Like, it sounds too Western. So we ended up adjusting his dialogue and making it more assertive, confident, more curt. Like, a lot of his lines became a lot shorter. So that he didn't sound like, because, like, what he was pointing out was that, like, the culture of, like, how rulers in China would have interacted with people versus how rulers in Europe would interact. That is very different. The dialogue I wrote would have probably worked fine for like a king or whatever in a European setting where they use like lots of flowery language and, you know, kind of like ramble on and whatnot. But that doesn't really fit for like a Chinese emperor character, especially for the kind of militaristic character we were trying to create. So Lubo's speech patterns and the way he talks, you could actually thank my husband for, because he's pretty responsible for that. But the design and everything, and like the backstory I created for him, were all on me, and it was fun pulling from Chinese lore.
Whose idea was it to put vanilla in the story? I think that was the most interesting thing when I was like, it's a vanilla story. It's kind of something you never switch.
It is. That's actually
not like I thought about.
I don't know, Slash, you'd be annoyed by me spoiling stuff, but I do actually want. There's a scene that I have planned in mind that touches on Vanilla and her relationship with her daughter. Basically, it's essentially a scene where we learn that Vanilla used to be like an aspiring like archaeologist, but just kind of like put that on the back burner when she had a kid so she could dedicate herself more wholly to just being a mom. And like Vanilla basically like gives the message to Amy, who she's explaining this to, that like Amy's like, so you just gave up on your dreams to take care of Cream, and Vanilla's like, well, I wouldn't say I gave up on them. I mean, you know, there's still a life after my daughter. I can always come back to them in the future, but she's what matters more to me right now. I think it's an interesting conversation. I think it's an interesting insight into Vanilla's character. Like, it gives us a perspective on her and where her values are. I don't think it's, like, that surprising or anything. I don't think it's a big shock. I think that it's just cool to see that Vanilla had a life before she was a mom. Like, it gives this idea that she's, like, an actual character and not just Cream's mom.
Did becoming a mom just make you want to write mom characters? Because you have another story I saw.
Yes, I ended up making one of my other characters into a mother of three. I took her from being like a teen sort of pop star. Well, she was never a pop artist. She was always a punk rocker. But like she was originally more just like a solo like teen character that I throw in there. But then I was like, what if I actually made her like a mom who's like middle-aged with 3 kids instead? And that ended up becoming like, I actually had a lot of fun just coming up with that story. That one is also a story that touches on themes of like parenthood, although this time instead of Amy getting to talk to a mother character about their experiences as a mom, this story is Sonic interacting with this punk rocker chick whose approach to parenting is kind of the polar opposite of Vanilla. Whereas Vanilla kind of put everything on hold to make her life about Cream, Gem instead, she didn't stop like being a rocker and traveling the world and going on adventures and going and like doing concerts and stuff. She just like found somebody who loved her the way that she was and wanted to be a part of that life with her, and they brought their kids along for the ride. So like, she didn't give up her passions at all. She just integrated her family into them. So the two very different approaches to being a parent, and I think the moral there is just sort of that there's no one size fits all like formula for good parenting or for a happy family. Like, every family is different, every kid is different, you know. Different things are going to work better for different people, you know. And also just kind of the sort of low-key puts the idea in Sonic's head while not stated explicitly from his character. It does kind of low-key put the idea in his head that, like, you know, maybe getting married or having kids or having a family in the future, whatever, maybe these things aren't such a big deal, and maybe they don't mean the end to, like, adventure and fun and individuality. Maybe I can still be me, you know, and have those kinds of relationships. Anyway, but yeah, I guess probably being a mom has made me want to write more stories about parenting. There were themes of parenting, I think, in my writing even before I became a mother, though. Just because, like, I grew up with, like, really shitty parents, so So to me, like, telling stories that kind of tackled the dynamics between parents and kids was always a thing that was big in my writing, even before I was a mother. I was really big on writing stories that explored, like, various different kinds of parent-child relationships, and especially explored, like, the complexities of, like, more toxic parent-child relationships, especially. I don't plan on putting any of that toxic family stuff in Sonic, though, because I want Sonic to be awesome.
Is there a franchise you'd want to write for that's not Sonic, that's also a kid's franchise?
Let me think. Let's see. Like, currently running stuff. I will say, if we're allowing stuff that's not running anymore, if I ever got a chance to make a reboot of Danny Phantom, I would jump on that, like, with fucking quickness.
What's attractive about Danny Phantom?
Oh, I adored the show as a kid, but I don't think it's
It's attractive, for your information.
Some of it's still, like, good, but, like, there are things about the show that I think definitely could be improved upon. I always loved the concept of Danny Phantom, and it was one of my favorite shows growing up, and it's a show that I think would be really fun to remake.
But I mean, like, what do you like about Danny Phantom? That's like, what's it about?
Well, if you don't know the premise of Danny Phantom, the premise is that the main character is half ghost.
What?
It's basically it's a superhero show where the main character is half ghost and fights ghosts. That's basically what it is. But I think that one of the things that if I could reboot it, is I would lean more heavily into, like, the whole paranormal ghost thing. And, like, it'd still be basically a superhero show, but I'd lean much more heavily on, like, the paranormal aesthetic and themes than the original show did. I always liked the character. Like, I always liked Danny as a character. I kind of crushed on him a bit as a kid. I liked the aesthetic of the show. Like, I like the color palettes it uses. I have kind of a fucking hard-on for, like, green and purple color palettes, and I think Danny Phantom and Invader Zim are kind of, like, the shows that gave me that hard-on, because they were two of my favorite cartoons growing up.
Y'all ship Vecta and Espio? Is that something for y'all?
Do what?
Do y'all ship Vecta and Espio?
No, not really. I wouldn't ship two characters just because they have color palette that I like. That's a pretty silly reason to ship two characters.
I guess I missed out on all these cartoons. I didn't have them when I was growing up.
Danny Phantom is a fun show, and it is definitely a show I would still recommend to people. Where there are some things that I don't think have aged great. Most of the show, I think, still holds up pretty alright.
Well, actually, y'all made Sonic's dad green and then shipped him with Alina. So y'all still made a green.
No, the reason that he was green was not because of my green and purple horniness. That was actually just because in Sonic Underground, Sonic is blue, Sonya is pink, and Manic is green. And their mom is purple. So there's that terrible echo. Just do something about it.
Mute your hat.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I was going to say, so the decision to make their dad green was because, like, Alina being purple meant that I could basically justify Sonic's blue hair and Sonya's pink hair. You know, like, their mom's got just a combination of the two. But in order to justify Manic, the only logical thing it felt to do was to just make their dad green. So that's why their dad is green. Also, their dad's name is Brandon, which is probably such a, like, dumb, like, name for a Sonic character. Well, I would say dumb, but it isn't really, because some Sonic characters do just have normal-ass human names. Yeah. But, like, I find it funny that Sonic's dad of all characters is a character that I just gave, like, a normal-ass human name.
I mean, maybe he has a normal name, but, yeah, you're right. As stupid as Underground was, I grew up with it and really enjoyed it.
I still enjoy it. I skip the music usually because they can't sing for shit. But Underground, I think it has its moments, and I think it can be charming at times. I always liked Manic and Sonya. If I could, like, give the Sonic cast in IDW any family member, like, create family for them, and could use whatever characters I wanted, I would bring back, like, Manic and Sonya and, like, Alina. I would not bring back the Archie parents because they were all fucking lazy dogshit characters. I'm sorry. But, like, most of them have no personality to speak of. and are usually just like Xeroxes of their kids, and it's really annoying and lazy, and I hate it. Especially Sally's family, they have this problem the worst. I guess Knuckles' dad is maybe a little bit better in the sense that he kind of has a personality. It's a shitty personality. He's not a great person, but that is at least a personality, even if it's not a good one. Knuckles' dad being a shitty dad at least gives him some character, which is more than I can say for most of the Archie parents. So, he's kind of okay, I guess.
Yeah, sure. Definitely.
But I would bring back Manic and Sonia and Alina if I could give the characters like any family. I don't even know if I would use Manic and Sonia in a shit ton of stories, but just like to establish that characters have family, you know, and that.
Yeah, I don't really understand the point of, to be 100% honest, the point of the parent characters. I feel like the characters can do fine and make their own stories without.
I think that the thing is just that when you have a story, there are two things that I want to do. One, I think that like just simply mentioning that the characters have family, even if those characters aren't like super active in their lives, like most people have family that are a part of their lives to some extent, and it almost starts to seem odd when a character doesn't seem to have any family whatsoever that's just ever a part of their life in any capacity. Like, you don't even mention them. You don't even, like, call up your mom on Mother's Day kind of thing. Like, if you're so disconnected from your family that they're just never a part of your life ever, even though you're constantly in life-threatening situations, it would sort of imply that maybe you and your family got some fucking shit going down. One thing that I would probably do if Seika let me, if I was on IDW, was just to establish that, like, it's normal for Mobians to, like, move out and become independent, like, around, like, 12 years old or so, which would explain most of the characters being fully independent, and Tails being independent at 8 would just be seen as him just being advanced and, like, you know, finishing his education early.
Like he finished high school at 16 or something like that.
Yeah, that, like, he'd be like, just establish that Mobians spend less time in school than humans do, and that they are generally independent at a much younger age. So, like, Sonic being independent at his age isn't weird at all. You know, he's not like he's basically seen as like an adult, I guess, in his community.
What do you say?
Y'all would lead into the two girls thing then?
I mean, if that's the way it has to go, sure.
Yeah, I mean, if Sega's gonna make us do two worlds, might as well commit.
It's not like that big of a deal. You can definitely.
It isn't really. I would just have it be like the Spyro games, where like they're just portals periodically in the world that you can use to go back and forth. Like, there just be portals. Just have like warp ring portals or whatever people can use to go back and forth between the two, and it's like not a big deal.
Yeah, I think I thought of a cool story idea. Well, not a story idea, but a concept where you probably aren't going to get this reference, but have you seen the the Call of Duty Black Ops 1 Nazi Zombies intro comics?
I have not.
Yeah. So, but basically it's how to explain? It basically sets up this idea where you have these kind of parallel dimensions. So you have these random splits. And not really explaining it too well, but basically I think it's an interesting way to explain how you could have this random split in the two worlds. So you have this like world going all the way up to Singular, going all the way up to SA2, and then there's this random split, and you have I guess it doesn't really work out too well if you go by that. But yeah, I think it's just kind of, you can explain.
I think the easiest thing to do is just to do the warp rings thing and just be like, oh, people can just pop back and forth between the two worlds whenever, and it's not that hard. Anyone
They would lose their goddamn minds. They'd be like, oh my gosh, you just broke our thing.
I also think that on that logic, though, too, that there should probably be more, that, like, you should still come across humans that live in Sonic's world or Mobians that live in the human world. Like, there would logically be crossover between the two worlds if, like, if visiting them was that easy, then obviously there would be people who'd like immigrate back and forth, and that would happen sometimes. But aside from just establishing that there is some crossover between the two worlds in terms of like the people that live there, you know, just make it easy to pass back and forth between the two, and establish that sometimes people move back and forth between the two. Like, and there you go. You problem solved. Keeps things simple. It basically, at that point, it kind of just operates as though it might as well be one world, really. You basically have simplified the issue to the point where it mechanically isn't that different from being one world. The only real difference is just that some areas are more populated by humans and some are more populated by Mobians. And yeah, I know Mobian is a word that Sega doesn't want us to use, but like, for the love of Christ, Sega, give us a word that we can use, because Sonic Worldian is not a fucking name.
I like it. Worldian comes off the tongue pretty well.
Worldian's not, I guess, the worst thing, but it's just... I don't know. It still feels just, like, even by the series standards, it feels lazy. Not even really sure what the big problem was with Mobian in the first place, besides just the fact that Americans coined the term. And we just have to erase anything and everything that was created by Americans, because fucking filthy Americans don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, they don't really like to... I feel like Japan really has a hard grip on Sonic.
Yeah.
It's kind of strange, because they have like a bunch of advertising for Japan, or a bunch of things centered around Japan, but it really does seem like the audience is in America.
Yeah, that like Sonic's not really as popular over there in Japan as it is in like America or Europe or Australia or any of these other countries. Like, it's more popular in a lot of Western cultures than it is in Japan, and yet they like absolutely are try to fight hard against allowing Western voices to have any influence on the franchise.
Definitely.
There it is. That's it sucks, bitch.
And it honestly,
What do you think of Sonic and human designs? It's starting to become controversial. I was curious what y'all thought about them. Because y'all human designs are not like Sonic Unleashed, so what do y'all think of that game's human design?
Character designs? What?
The Sonic Unleashed human designs. I was never really a fan of them. Honestly.
I'm not. I feel like they're too cartoonish. They're not really...
There's that new game that's coming out. Like the one, oh god.
Wonderland? Wonderworld?
Yeah, like, because it's the same guy who did the designs for Sonic, who designs the humans in that game.
Yeah.
I feel like the humans in that game are what humans in Sonic should look like, because they have like the same design logic as like the Sonic characters do. Should like make the humans look like that.
I feel like they should be also like 5 feet tall at most, or they shouldn't tower over Sonic and kill. Like everyone should
I don't mind if they do.
What?
Like, I mean, Eggman does.
Yeah, but I guess he can just be an exception, you know?
I don't know. I think it's okay that the humans are like significantly taller. I don't really think that's a big deal. Maybe that's also partly coming from the perspective of someone who is themselves very short. I am technically legally a dwarf by like an inch. Which I know, like, it's not really like, you know, it's not like that big of a deal, I guess, because I'm like, I could say I'm technically a dwarf, but it's not like I get like I can claim to deal with the kind of problems that people with dwarfism deal with, like on that level. Anyway,
Well, I mean, if anyone's listening long enough, I'm sure if your shit posters were actually listening, that would be a new meme in the threads.
Oh, I don't care. You can make a meme about me being a dwarf. It's true. I don't care. My point is that from the perspective of someone who is pretty short, like oh god, like my ex was like almost 3 feet taller than me. So, like, I don't know. I feel like the humans towering over the Mobians isn't really that big a deal. Like, people tower over me in just my normal life. Like, people who are normal sized are way taller than me. So I guess, like, a part of me kind of relates to, like, when Sonic is in these environments where, like, all the other townspeople are, like, way taller. I'm like, same, fam, same. Damn it. Oh. No, it's kind of true, though. It's like, I don't mind the height difference, because, like, for me, that's just kind of my life, only slightly more exaggerated than what I put up with. And even then, it's not really that big of a deal. You know, it's annoying most of the time. It's annoying, and sometimes people like treat me like a goddamn child. It happened less after I had a kid, because I got a mom body after I had a kid, and so now I don't get mistaken for a child much anymore. Even though I'm still really short and baby faced, but the mom body, I guess, makes up for it now. But I would get people, like, talking down to me a lot and treating me like a kid just because I'm short and I look young. I don't know. I don't mind that the Mobians are short. Heck, in Sonic's case, he technically is young compared to a human, but I already established that I kind of have the headcanon that Mobians just, you know, are independent a lot earlier than humans are. So Sonic's actually just kind of an adult in his world, but just not by our standards. Which could be interesting. You could get some interesting jokes out of that. You could get interesting interactions out of the way humans perceive people like Sonic. They, like, the assumption, like, oh, you're a kid, you're a child, look at you. And that could be interesting. It never comes up. There's never anyone in these games, none of the humans ever really draw any attention to the height difference, despite how drastic it is. And no one ever points out that maybe it's weird that this 15-year-old boy is just constantly unattended and saving the world by himself. Like, are your parents, kid?
How do you think Metal Sonic should be characterized?
I really would love to see Metal Sonic actually split off from Eggman, honestly. But I know that's never gonna happen at this point.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see him become
Yeah.
a Patrick Bateman kind of character. If you ever read
I'll wrap up and head to bed in a minute, baby. I know. But yeah, like, I could see there, like, for example, I could see Metal Sonic splitting off, like, I bringing up my own goddamn shit again, but, like, I created a story in which Metal Sonic, basically, like, split off from Eggman and essentially tried to, like, start, like, a revolution, like, you know, a robot revolution.
Yeah,
Robots in this world are frequently depicted as having, like, feelings and complex thoughts and personalities, but they're still treated like objects that are just expected to serve functions, especially by Eggman and so, like, the idea is that Metal Sonic would split off and basically, like, rally his robot brethren together, like, we're people, not just tools, you know?
Is he like the Blade Runner or the replicant lady in Blade Runner 2049? She's making an army.
Yeah, that's basically the plot, was, like, just rallying together all these robots and doing an uprising, initially with the plan of taking over the world, but ultimately being convinced to, instead of take over the world, just take all of his robots to an unpopulated area and just found a new nation where they can live independently.
Yeah, no offense, but I kind of feel like that's been done a couple times.
I know, but it's more interesting than Metal Sonic having no personality at all, which is usually what we get.
Well,
but I like the hero's characterization of Metal Sonic as a character who has, like, his own like, motivations and is kind of manipulative and clever. Yeah. You know.
Well, I mean, I feel like he would do well as, like, I don't know if you've read American Psycho, but like a Patrick Bateman where he is truly indifferent to like all the destruction that he's caused. So, like,
yeah.
And I feel like it's a really interesting character.
I'm saying I think there's a lot of cool things in general you can do with him if you split him off from Eggman, and just let him be his own antagonist.
Yeah.
Make him a motivational speaker.
But yeah, point is, Metal Sonic would probably be more interesting if he split off. But the same thing could be fucking said of Zavik. Zavik could be made more interesting if you stop fucking connecting him to Eggman for no reason. Zavik doesn't even have a reason to be tied to Eggman as often as he is. They just apparently are incapable of writing villains that are just independent villains. I feel like Sonic needs more independent villains. Don't get me wrong, Eggman should still be like our regular go-to villain, but like let us have more like one-off independent villains and like build a rogues gallery. You know? I like rogues galleries.
If you took off Amy's hairband, would she end up like having Quill's, like, would her hairstyle or Quill style be like Sonic again or like her classic self? If you was to
hairband, I think that she probably uses some kind of straightening products on her hair or like certain types of conditioner or something. Like, I think it probably has more to do with like some type of hair products that make it really flat rather than the hairband, because the hairband wouldn't do that by itself. I think it's hair products. I think she like straightens her hair or something.
So the line, does she just never? I mean, because she wears it in Reborn, so is that just something she just never wanted to give it up?
I don't remember if I always give her a hairband in Reborn. I think I do sometimes, maybe, but I don't think she actually wears it all the time in there.
Oh, okay, never mind. I must be normal things.
I had in one of my drafts of the second chapter, there was a couple panels where we saw Amy like getting dressed for the day, and it showed her like taking a hair iron to her hair to get it to lay flat, and like, you know, as well as just like putting on makeup and getting dressed.
So every day she wakes up,
her hair is all poofed up and it sticks up, and then she straightens it. But like,
does it look like Amy when she wakes up in the morning, or?
Yeah, when she wakes up, it sticks up just like any other Hedgehog character. Like, her hair sticks up just like the others when she wakes up in the morning, and then she straightens it. So like, you will eventually get opportunities to see Amy in this comic with like her hair all like fluffed up, but we just kind of haven't really gotten a good scene for that yet. This hasn't been like a... Because, I did show that in one of the drafts of Chapter 2 and then cut that because it flowed better and was more efficient to just have Amy just wake Sonic up already dressed and ready to go. Like, that just moved the story along faster, and, like, the bit showing her getting ready was cute, but not really necessary. Like, it didn't justify the page count that it ate up, especially because we really need to get into, like, the meat of the story, and Reborn is kind of a slow burn start. So I just kind of want to start getting through all this setup stuff.
So my last question for you. Does Amy have a tan belt, or is it all pink?
It's pink because that was how it looked in Sonic X.
Okay. That is a huge debate in the community.
I think
it's really fun.
Sonic X established it as being pink. I just stick with that and be consistent.
And would you ever consider having Reborn use blob feet?
No, I do not like blob feet. I don't use them in Reborn. I don't use them on my canon style art either. I usually use paws, where it's basically the same shape as the blob feet, but you just add 2 little lines to indicate toes. Like, they got like 3 toes, and they're these big fat chubby paws, and they're cute. And I mean, I guess maybe it's weird to have them have like 3 toes on their feet but 5 fingers on their hands, but you know what? Whatever. I don't really care. They're cartoon characters. It's fine. And besides, some animals actually do have different numbers of digits on their front legs versus their back legs. Like, there's some animals, like guinea pigs, have a different number of toes on their front feet than they do on their back feet. So it's not like it's unheard of. So yeah, that's how I do them. I do them with like paw feet. I think that I think that like some of the earlier chapters, maybe 3. There's some earlier pages like chapter 1 and like earlier parts of chapter 2, I think, where like I didn't really draw them with the paw feet. I kind of just drew them with like human feet. but then later just committed to giving them the paw feet because it was easier to draw. And because I was already doing the paw feet on my canon style art, so it's like, just, you know, they're easier to do, and I already do it on the canon art, so I'll just do it on the reborn characters too, and just fucking make my life a little easier by not having to draw feet. But I think the blob feet are just kind of like, they're just lazy. You know, they're really goddamn lazy. You just add 2 little lines to indicate toes, and it looks so much better and takes like no extra effort. You know, just saying. Do not like the blob feet. I'm very much committed to the paws thing. The shape is the same big feet, the same round shape to them, but they just look better than the blob feet. Have an extra detail.
I'm gonna go now. It was nice talking to y'all.
Oh wait, you know what? Actually, I think I might have a minor defense for the paw feet, and would argue that this doesn't count. But Chip has them.
Oh,
That is a weird thing. I never even realized that. Oh my gosh, y'all right. I mean, granted, Chip is like not a real Lobian. Like,
no, he's not, but he clearly has a similar design.
That is so weird.
And he's described as being a Chihuahua.
I mean, it's also weird to remember that, like, if we're doing the 2 worlds thing, that means that the guardian of the human world wants to take the form of a Mobian. I mean, really, it's so fun when you actually, like, start trying to make sense of 2 worlds.
The 2 worlds does, like, become increasingly more confusing, but I think part of how you keep it less confusing is just by... That Echo is gonna drive nuts. I think part of how you keep the 2 worlds thing less confusing is just by making it so that moving between the worlds is so easy, and there's so much overlap between them, because, like, they've been connected to each other in this way for so long, that, like, you know, you basically have 2 worlds, but you've basically made it so that the fact that there are 2 worlds is almost not even really an issue. Because there's just tons of overlap between them, like magic that bleeds between the 2 of them back and forth, and people who immigrate between the 2 of them back and forth, and whatever have you. You know.
So basically taking 2 worlds and taking it and basically turning it back into 1 world, essentially.
Yeah, basically. You're basically making it 1 world without technically making it 1 world. It's kind of cheating, but I think it's the best way.
I mean, it really makes no other sense, because it really is. I mean, granted, people say that, and I guess I agree with it, but, like, I'm pretty sure if you played Sega's Hand, they'd probably, like, I don't know if they would actually give you an answer, but people are just saying, like, oh, well, it doesn't actually exist, it was just an excuse to get humans out of the series, which is weird just because of how much effort they put into this concept, that, like, it seems weird you put all this effort into a concept and then decide that it can't be used. I mean, that's why I think it would be used, is because Sega could just say it's retconned, and that's it. Sega could just say these things didn't happen this way, and that's it. To spend a lot of time trying to, like, create some mythos about some weird... I think I'm actually going to go with the better answer, that they just put a lot of effort into something and didn't actually think it through. They try to put some... Because Sega can't world build for shit. I think they were trying to do world building and trying to explain things and just made a bigger mess, and they don't know how to get themselves out of the hole.
Like, it's the bad world building is literally just a product of laziness. It wouldn't take that much to come up with a way to make the world make sense. You know, it's just lazy world building is the thing, and so, like, it ends up being really confusing just because, like, you just didn't think it through. Just fucking take a little bit of time instead of just making decisions about your world impulsively just on a whim, and you wouldn't have that problem.
Anyway, I'm gonna go now. Good night, y'all.
I need to head to bed too.
Yeah, I guess we'll close it out.
Sorry if I chewed people's ears off. I guess if you ask me questions, I give long answers.
No issue. Have a good night.
You too.
And a good night to everyone else.